Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial we are going to look at changing the camera itself. So we're going to get a better camera movement, so when you're playing around with as your player moves, it's not going to get this kind of jerky motion where it seems to be switching back and forth, as well as keeping our camera within our level itself. Okay, so currently when we play, right, so when you go to the edge here, you can see that the camera kind of moves out where you get this blue space to the side, so that's beyond kind of where our level is. So what we want to do is to move it where the camera is going to be bound, where it doesn't go down past those spots and so on. The other thing that I did add some more sounds to it, to the game itself. And when you do that, you want to be working from the sound manager. So you want to be working within the sound manager itself to be changing it. Sorry, from the prefab. So when you change it in the prefab, it's going to change it throughout all of the levels in that. Okay, so again, so from your prefab, when you're changing these, it should change it in both of the scenes. So for example, so if you wanted a different sound effect fully, you would change it in the prefab. If you want, so if we just go back, you can click back, and then this just takes us back to the scene. So I'm going to save this, and so if we go into scene 2, and I'm just going to change the sound. So if I go to my sound manager here, I can change my sound itself. So I'm going to use this as a different background that I had. So if I change it in here, the swinging sweet sound, so now when I play it, I'm going to have, or should have, different sounds within the two different levels. So save my scene. And just to illustrate, so sound manager, so I have the swinging sweet. If I go back to scene 1, my sound manager here has the jungle music, right? Whereas if I change it in the prefab, so if I'm in the prefab, and if I change that this here, it's going to change it in all of the scenes that have the sound manager, right? So it changes it everywhere. So that's kind of the difference, or kind of how you can work with a prefab. So if you wanted to change the hit sound in all of the scenes, then you would want to change it here in the prefab. Otherwise, if you are changing them in, so if I change anything here, so if I change, for example, I decide I want to change my collection sound, and if I change it here, it's only going to change in scene 1. Right, so you need to make sure you change it in a prefab. So again, that's the importance of those prefabs. So right now I have the 2 different background musics. I have the one in scene 1, and then you can change it in scene 2 by just changing it in from here. Right, so you can change it here, which only changes this scene, so this file itself. So anyways, that's that. So what we're going to do today is look at, again, the changing the camera itself. So what you need to do is you need to add the Cinemachine, which I've already added. So in the Windows, you want to go to Package Manager, and then you want to, as this gets those packages, so you want to make sure this is in the Unity registry. So it's in the Unity registry. Again, yours, depending on when it loads, it might be one of these, but make sure Unity registry. And then you're going to go down to Cinemachine, you're going to click on it, and then you're going to say install. So I have it installed currently, so mine says remove, but you're going to install the Cinemachine, and then it should open up, or it's going to add a tab up at the top here. So do that now, add the Cinemachine, pause out as it loads up. And with the Cinemachine, we're going to create a new camera angle. So we're going to, Cinemachine, we're going to create a 2D camera. And you can see here it creates this SMVCam, right, which is using this camera up here as so you can see that this here is now essentially attached to our virtual camera that we created. So we don't want the script. So rather than delete it, I'm just going to turn the script off. You can remove the component. So what you want to do is remove the component. For now, I'm just going to leave it there. And now in your virtual camera, So currently we have the camera won't be following anything. So before in our script, remember we told the camera to, in that script we created the transform. In the Cinemachine we have this follow. So we want to follow the player. So we're going to just drag our player over into the follow. And now the camera will follow our player. Right, so if we push play, everything should work basically the same way, except that we're using this Cinemachine camera now. Right, so everything works that this camera is following our player. So don't worry about the blue coloring in that right now. So what this is it's a camera that we can change some of the settings for how that camera works. So again, when we play, our camera moves right away when we move, right? So if you're moving your player back and forth, actually this even has already a slight delay, but as you move, it kind of, so what we want to do is create a dead zone essentially. So one you have, so I'm going to go through a few of these settings. So currently we have this orthographic size, which is the camera size. So you could make this smaller if you want. So we can make it smaller. I'm going to put it at 10. I think 10 is a good size. Again, depends on your game itself. And then down in the body, there are a number of things that you can play around with in terms of the settings. So the look ahead time, and this is where if you play, so really what you probably want to do is, and I've already done this, so I have settings that I'm going to set up, but just to go through a few of the settings. So if you go play, you can play with these settings and change them as you go, right? So again, make sure you click back, and you can see the look ahead time essentially just moves ahead a little bit, and then you can change the smoothing, which actually that's why it's kind of jumping right away. So you can see that it slowly moves, and then it's looking at, the camera's moving a little bit ahead of the player. So that's sort of what that does. Similarly, we can create what's called a dead zone. I'm just going to make this 1. No, I don't want it as 1, I guess. 0.1 and 0.2 just to, actually let's go the other way. So I'll make this 0.4. So what this dead zone is it, again, click back in your scene, right? I can move in this dead zone and the camera's not moving. And then it's when you jump out of the dead zone does the camera start to move. Right, and then the camera will start to follow you at that point. So rather than use the look ahead, I'm going to be using this as sort of to allow you to move ahead a bit and then so on. So that's the dead zone, and really they're the bigger ones that you'll probably use. You could look at other settings and how other things are set up, but again, for now, to simplify, we're really just going to look at modifying a few things. Again, when you stop it, these settings all reset, right? Because you set them when you were in play. So I'm not going to use the look ahead time. However, I am going to set a dead zone width of 0.25. I'm going to set a dead zone height of 0.2. And the depth we don't need because we're only in 2 dimensions. And that's it. So that's all we need to do for that. So that sets our camera. Now the other thing we want this camera to stay within the bounds of the level here. So at the bottom, you want to go down to add an extension, and we want to add a Cinemachine confiner. Right, so you're going to add the confiner, and then this confiner, we need to put a bounding shape, which needs to be a polygram. So in our collider, to create the collider, we're going to go back to our grid. So we're going to do this within the grid itself. We're going to create a new 2D object, so create a 2D tile map. And we're going to call this let's call it the camera bounds. And on this tile map, we're going to add a collider. Except this time we're going to, sorry, not a polygon collider. So we're going to add a polygon collider. And you must make sure this is a trigger. So I'm going to do that now. If you forget to put this as a trigger or you unclick it, what'll happen is, because we're going to basically put this collider around the entire level, everything is inside the collider and essentially colliding with it. So your player might disappear and your game will look weird. So that might simply because of this not being a trigger. So on the polygon collider, if you hold control, so this is currently a 5-sided polygon. So if you hold control, oh, sorry, I need to click on it first. So I want to edit it. If you hold control, you can see that you can get this side selected. So when you have it on where you have two sides, all I did was I left clicked. So if you left click, it'll get rid of a side. So if I left click again, it gets rid of another side, right? And again, I'm holding control this whole time. So I'm going to control Z and do that. So you hold control, so you can move your mouse around the colliders. And then when you have the vertex that you want deleted, you click on the left button and it deletes the point, essentially the vertex, which really gets rid of a side. So we only want a 4-sided figure. If you click outside, right, you start adding these more vertexes, and then it gets really hard to find where your points are. So it's really just practice, and it's very hard to, in some ways, to make sure that you are always. So just go to the point and just make sure, and just keep dragging from the point, right? So what you're going to do is move these so that they are at the 4 corners. So I'm going to pause out and do that. Okay, so once you have your collider moved to the corners, you can zoom in. So I've already done it for the other 3 corners. So you can zoom in and move this so that it's more accurately kind of in the corners. And I actually zoomed in quite a bit. And then move this so that it was up at the corners. And that's it. So that creates our camera bounds. And then what we need to do now is go back to our virtual camera. And where we have this bounding shape, we want to put our camera bound. So drag where that collider is, move it down into there, and now our camera is going to be bound within there. So now if we push play, so now when we play, our camera is bound within the within those sides, right? So it doesn't go beyond there, it doesn't go down below. Similarly, if we go up, the camera should only, I don't know if I can jump up there. I'm not going to go high enough anyways, but basically, right, so the camera is now bound where we want it, so you don't get all that blue space on the outsides. And that's just it, right? So if you have your VCam on, that's why it's showing like that, right? So if you just click off your virtual camera, it's not going to show you don't see those boundaries and so on. So that's not going to be there when you're playing a game and so on. So anyway, so that's it for the virtual camera. That's fairly straightforward. It just gives you a little bit of a better camera in the sense that, right? So as I move, it allows you that freedom of, okay, the camera takes a second to move back and forth. It's bounded now between the sides. I might actually change and again, you can play with the settings to kind of the way you want your camera to look. So that's it for the camera itself, and that's pretty much it for what you need to develop your game. So at this point now, it would really be developing a story. Oh, keep in mind as well, actually, this virtual camera is only in scene 1. So you can, again, make it as a prefab, move it into scene 2, or, again, if scene 2 is not really developed, you can just delete scene 2 and then save this as scene 2 and so on. But at this point, you have pretty much all of the things that you need. You have a couple of enemy things, you have a few platforms, cherries, and so on. So at this point, it would really be about expanding your story or thinking about your story and what is the goal, what's the story behind your character, whether you use this as your character or something else or your enemies or whatever it may be, right? So try to add a little bit of a story detail to it. And that's really it, right? So it's the story now, work through, create some levels, and you could always expand with other things. I will be creating some more tutorials on looking at adding other types of game objects, other types of enemies and AIs for those characters. But that's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorials. Take care, and hopefully I'll see you in some of the future videos.